Welcome to another edition of the CS Podcast presented by the NFL Draft Bible and NUC Sports. Be sure to check out the NUC Sports magazine at NFLDraftBible.com. I'm your guys' host, Chris Shanafelt, and joining the show now is Aaron Leming from BearReport.com. You guys can give him a follow on Twitter at Aaron Leming NFL, and I actually had the pleasure of meeting Aaron down in Bourbonnais a couple weeks ago at Bears training camp. Aaron, how's everything going?
Doing good. How about you?
Everything's great, man. Everything's great, of course. There's been some big news surrounding the Bears as, of course, General Manager Ryan Pace met with the media down in Bourbonnais on Saturday and announced that first-round pick Kevin White suffered a setback last week, and he'll need surgery on that shin injury he's been dealing with. It sounds like they're going to have to insert a rod into his tibia. Doesn't sound good at all. Now White will stay put on the PUP list, which means he'll miss at least the first 6 games, but even Ryan Pace said that it's a possibility that he can indeed miss the entire season. This actually came as a pretty big surprise to me. I mean, after seeing White making progress, doing light jogs, light workouts on the sidelines during practices, and then, about 2 weeks ago, John Fox said, and I quote, "It's not like we're covering up some awful injury," he said. Looking now, it seems like that's exactly what they were doing. What was your reaction to the news that Kevin White will have surgery and will miss at least the first 6 games of the regular season? And how do you feel about the way Ryan Pace and John Fox handled this whole thing by sharing very, very little information on this injury?
The whole entire thing was dealt with pretty weirdly. I can't defend them on that. It does seem like a blatant cover-up. I don't know if they thought it was as bad as it was, or if maybe he had, suffered the injury, in OTAs and, thought it was going to heal on its own, but it didn't. And instead of taking care of the issue then, doing the surgery, and doing that, they didn't do that. So, unfortunately, it's a decent blow. It's not a huge blow like some fans may think. I actually just published an article earlier on today talking about just how big of an impact that Kevin White was going to have this year. And, realistically, he's going to be running the ball a lot more. There's going to be less throws to go around. So, it hurts, and it hurts his development. That's a big thing. Even if he is out just those first 6-7 weeks of the season. Ultimately, if he does play this year, which I'm kind of doubting he will, but if he does play this year, it's not going to be until probably after the bye week anyway. So I'm more worried about his overall development than I am anything else at this point. I do think the way the front office handled it was weird. John Fox, he was snarky with the media when they addressed everything. I don't really understand that. And speaking with a Denver beat writer, he wasn't that way in Denver. So I'm not really sure what his issue with Chicago media is so far. I don't know if it's him ramping things up after how out of control things got last year with Trestman and Emery. But it's definitely something that they've got to get a handle on because, the media guys got to do their job. And you can't do their job, if they're getting lied to and misinformation is getting spread around.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And you mentioned that, you didn't really see White having a huge impact on this team this year. Looking at the wide receiver depth that this team has, Aaron, this team has Alshon Jeffrey, Eddie Royal, Marquise Wilson, and then after that, there's a few guys battling it out for roster spots. And, of course, there's still Martellus Bennett and Matt Forte. So even with White being out for what might be the entire season, this offense still has really good weapons. Obviously, having Kevin White out there, it would have helped this team out. It will help this team out if he is out there. How much of an impact will not having Kevin White out there really have on this team? Will it really be that big of an impact? I don't think so, and it almost sounds like you seem that way as well.
Yeah, ultimately it really won't. I originally had him projected as 45 to 50 catches, somewhere right around 600-700 yards. The big thing that a lot of people they're kind of overshooting. They have high expectations for first-round picks in general, draft picks in general, and they expect these guys to come in right away and just pick it up and be star players. And ultimately, I think it's a little unfair, especially coming out of last year when there was, that receiver class was absolutely historic. Things like that have never been done before. The amount of people that went over 1,000 yards and had the impact that they did, that's just not a realistic expectation for any draft class and any player, So after crunching some numbers and doing some stuff, realistically, he was probably looking at anywhere from, 30 to 40 catches this year, especially battling out with Wilson. I mean, even if he was to come back in and step in, I mean, he can be battling for the number 3 receiver spot. Eddie Royal's coming in, and like you mentioned, you have Martellus Bennett, and you've got Matt Forte, Alshon Jeffrey, Eddie Royal. I mean, realistically, he was looking at being the 5th target anyway if he did beat out Marcus Wilson. So ultimately, it is a little bit of a blow. Like I said, I'm mainly worried about his development over time, but it's not the end of the world. It's not Ryan Pace's fault that he drafted a guy and he wasn't hurt during the draft process. So that's just not a fair judgment. And realistically, I mean, he could bounce back from it. They say that to be anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks of an actual recovery time, and then after that he's going to have to get back into football shape. But I've also read some things saying that ultimately it could be smarter just to let him not play the rest of the year. This is an injury that could be a reoccurring thing if they do rush him back, which obviously they don't want. So if that means him sitting out 1 year, on even a rookie deal, a 4 or 5 year plan like that, I mean, do it. That's just you gotta be smart about your draft picks, and rushing somebody back after significant injury is not the way to go.
Yeah, especially a first-round pick, new regime, everything like that. This is Ryan Pace's first pick. Things haven't looked too great for Ryan Pace so far, but I still feel good about Ryan Pace being the team's general manager. I still feel good about Kevin White long-term. I agree with you. You cannot rush him back. It's just going to take time. It's just going to take time for him to get back out there. You don't want to rush this guy back. Once again, writer for BearReport.com, Aaron Leming, joining the CS podcast presented by the NFL Draft Bible and NUC Sports. And Aaron, I mean, looking back to when you were in Bourbonnais for training camp, I mean, was there any specific players that caught you off guard by how well they were looking out there?
Well, Lamarr Houston was one, man. He looked great. He looked great in the outside linebacker position. It's worth noting that, when he was with Oakland, the main pass rushing productivity that he had was out of a 2-point stance, whether that was in the wide 9 or the outside linebacker. There's a misconception at the fact that, he's a defensive tackle, and he's not. So he was somebody that looked really good to me. Sherrick McManus was another one. The whole entire receiving core looked great. I mean, there's really just no way around that. Marquise Wilson's having another great camp. Of course, Alshon Jeffrey, when he gets back, not too worried about him missing a few preseason games. Not a big deal there. And then the one, I don't know if I would call it a surprise, but the one person that just the whole entire time that I watched him was Matt Boston. I mean, he looked like he hadn't missed a beat. I almost kind of wonder if he's coming back even better than he was after the injury. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, honestly. I mean, they've got some young pieces. They got a lot of pieces that are, kind of looking for places to go. But, there's some impressive talent. A guy like Kyle Fuller is another one to keep an eye on, especially struggling a little bit in coverage. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's, used to playing last year in Mel Tucker zone, if that's what you want to call it. Now he's going a little bit more man. He's got to be a little bit more aggressive. So you're going to see that with a lot of the corners and DBs that came back from last year. It's going to take a little bit of an adjustment. But yeah, overall, I think Matt Boston is definitely the most impressive player I saw.
By no means am I saying this team's going to be 12-4 and make a playoff appearance or even win a playoff game, but I do see some similarities between this Bears team and last year's Dallas Cowboys team in ways how the media and really just fans are just writing the Dallas Cowboys off last year, and here they go. They make a great run and almost knock off the Green Bay Packers. Excuse me. By no means am I saying this team's going to make a playoff appearance, but I do feel that a lot of people are selling this team short. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's one of those things I've been saying it for a while now. I could see him going 6-10. I could see him going 11-5. I think you really hit the nail on the head, though, with the Cowboys. I mean, that's a perfect blueprint right there. They may not have quite as good of an offensive line, but, I mean, let's look back to last year. Cowboys, USA Today had them projected as a 3-13 team. It's one of those things that a lot of the Bears' success, especially offensively, is going to be running the ball. Jay Cutler, Tony Romo are very similar quarterbacks. You'd probably give the heads up to Tony Romo overall, but they're both mistake prone. They both have big talent, big ability. So I think the biggest thing with Cutler is going to be, running the ball. The Bears threw the ball 73% of the time last year. That was something I did a little bit of research on last night. I mean, that's just absolutely unheard of. I don't know how, 67% of the time. I don't know how you can expect to be successful. No quarterback's going to be successful, not even Aaron Rodgers. He's going to start making mistakes. And you start looking at this year and you see what Adam Gase has done, even in practice and a little bit in the first preseason game. Cutler's not making mistakes, man. He's throwing one interception the whole entire training camp, and that's a big deal for him. A lot of people say, oh, it's just practice, it's just preseason. But limiting his mistakes and really, limiting his decision-making as a whole is going to be big. The quick reads, just basically getting the ball out of his hands and not making him think too much is going to be big. And, the Bears' strength on the offensive line is going to be the interior line. You got Kyle Long, Matt Slauson, obviously Will Montgomery. He's definitely an upgrade over Roberto Garza last year. He may just be an average center, but their interior line is going to be good this year. So if the tackles can hold up, they'll have the pass protection. But the big thing is running the ball. So, no, I definitely agree. I think Vic Fangio is going to step things up. There's just no doubt about that. We've already seen in the first preseason game. He's installing the defense. Players have got to get used to playing in a different scheme. It's just a completely different ball game, but he's a top coach for a reason. So I think they're in good shape. I definitely think they could surprise people this year.
And, of course, the first preseason game was just on Friday night against the Miami Dolphins. And although it did get off to a shaky start with the Dolphins offense scoring on the opening drive, I got to say the Bears' backups looked pretty good out there. I was actually pretty surprised with how well Jimmy Clausen performed. The backup quarterback competition it's been a rough one to keep an eye on, as both he and Carden have really struggled in training camp. It seems like Jimmy Clausen, though, has started to pick things up, especially with this preseason performance. The running backs looked great. Friday night, Forte sat out. Rodgers, Carey, and Perry all made plays against Miami. And on defense, Sam Acho and Sherrick McManus both continue to impress, as they both forced turnovers. What were some things you took from preseason game number 1, and what do you expect to see, in preseason game number 2 on Saturday against the Indianapolis Colts?
Well, one of the biggest things that stood out to me in the first preseason game was the play of the linebackers. Pernell McPhee had a little bit of a tough go of it. Actually, I'd take it back to the whole entire front seven. They just the inside linebacker, Shea McClellan. In coverage, he dropped back. You saw him, almost get in front of that ball, and that's something that he wouldn't have done last year. He's playing aggressively. He's filling the gap, especially in the run, very impressively, which is great. He just seems like a completely different person right now, a completely different player. Christian Jones looked pretty well. Mason Foster looked excellent, in my opinion. John Bostic looked okay. John Timus looked great. Jonathan Anderson. You got a whole bunch of Johns there. They're all looking pretty good. And then you look at the defensive line, and Ego Ferguson definitely impressed me a little bit. Then you had Eddie Goldman, who had a great game, probably one of the best games out of all, the whole entire roster. He's really developed not only as a run stuffer, but he was in the backfield quite a bit, creating some pressure. So that's definitely big. Wasn't too impressed with Jenkins. He is what he is. You're gonna get what you're gonna get with him, and realistically, he's probably more of a run stuffer. And he's probably more of a rotational piece than anything. But Sherrick McManus looked great. Terrence Mitchell looked very good before he went out with what looked like a concussion. I don't think he came back into the game. Didn't really see much from Alan Ball, not either way. It wasn't that he played bad or anything. But their starting corners looked a little interesting. But like Sherrick McManus showed, the same thing with Kyle Fuller. They're adjusting playing in man, and it's going to take a little bit. They got to be more aggressive. They can't give that 5-yard cushion that they're giving everybody, especially Fuller. Everybody cuts the side on him and makes a pretty easy catch. So, looking to this weekend, I read something saying that the starters are going to be playing a full half. That'll definitely be good. It'll be interesting to see what they do at the safety position. Brock Vereen, did not look good at all. Looked late like he did last year. Very weak against the run. He just doesn't really look big enough. He may be a better slot corner when it's all said and done. But I think a big guy to watch this week is going to be Adrian Amos. I was high on him coming out of college. He's got great coverage skills, former cornerback, just made the switch to safety. From what I hear and what I've seen, he looked pretty good in camp. He had a pretty solid game. So, I mean, as long as he's good in the run and as long as he complements Rollwell, I think that could be a big X factor for the Bears this year, especially on that back end.
Amos has been taking first-team snaps this week, taking some snaps away from Brock Vereen. And you know what, Aaron? Last time I had you on the show, you said that you weren't buying the Shea McClellan hype. And you know what? I kind of felt that same way. I'm slowly but surely, buying into it. Do you still feel the same 1 month later?
I have to say, I think I might be wrong. He's impressed. He's impressed everybody I've talked to in practice. He's impressed me in the game. Like I said, how aggressive he was against the run was impressive. Not to mention, him dropping back like that was very impressive. And that was another thing, too, that I saw even with Jared Allen, is his ability to actually cover a receiver, cover that tight end was big. So I think he could be a big contributor this year. He's calling the plays. Read something saying that the mic in his head or the headphone or whatever it may be in his helmet went out. So he was making calls all on his own. That's a big deal. They could have got off the field on that first drive, if it wasn't for a few stupid penalties. But yeah, he definitely looked like a leader. He looked like an inside linebacker in a starting NFL defense. So who knows? Maybe Vic Fangio's got him figured out. Maybe the move to inside linebacker really was the right thing. I think we'll see more this week and in the coming weeks, but things are definitely looking up.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Even Shea McClellan said himself that I believe it was the first series that headset in his helmet went out. And, yeah, from there on, it was just him calling the defensive plays. And, you mentioned Jay Cutler just threw his first interception within the last couple of days. It was Shea McClellan who picked that off in practice. So it seems like he's having a pretty good start to this preseason training camp. And to end this conversation, Aaron, I really do appreciate your time. I have a few Twitter questions for you. And I'll start off with Charles, who asks about somebody who has quickly turned into a fan favorite, and that's A.J. Cruz. Charles simply asks, what are your impressions on Cruz, and is there any chance that he makes the squad?
Well, with Cruz, his ticket's going to be special teams and going to be a returner. He had a few good looks. Overall, he's a very small guy. You saw that in training camp, too. It's hard to imagine guys that size, really being able to make an impact on a roster. He doesn't look like he has that explosion. I think Mark Mariani will look a little bit better. But he's definitely still right in the thick of things. He's one of 4 or 5 guys still taking kickoff returns in practice. So, they're definitely starting to weed people out, and he's still in there. I don't know if he's going to make a big contribution as far as a receiver if he was to make the team, but it would be purely special teams at this point, and especially as a returner. But, he's got some upside, so we'll have to see what happens.
And he's been fun to watch. Almost every day I was there at camp, he's either making plays on special teams or making a diving catch at receiver. Next question is from Will, who sounds a bit concerned with the depth the Bears have at cornerback, and asks if you would feel comfortable with Al Lewis, Gene, or Terrence Mitchell seeing meaningful snaps in the regular season.
Terrence Mitchell, I'm high on. I think he was a projected 4th, 5th round pick coming out of the draft, and I don't know what happened, but he went. I think he was a 7th round pick, 7th round pick or went undrafted. I can't really remember. But no, his biggest thing is size. He's not a big guy, but he makes the plays. He's an aggressive guy. He's somebody who's also impressed Jeremy as well. He's one of the guys that he's been raving about. So yeah, I think a guy like Mitchell definitely could have some value, and I wouldn't mind seeing him. I wouldn't be particularly happy, but I wouldn't mind seeing him. As far as Alice Gene goes, I just think he's so raw at this point. He's still so young. He's got great size, and I think that's one of the main reasons that he stuck around so long. But he looked awful the first preseason game, and really he looked awful last year in coverage. I think he's really a guy that you got to hope that you can hide on the practice squad again this year. And if not, you just cut your losses with him because, unfortunately, like I said, he really just hasn't done much. But Terrence Mitchell's a guy that I wouldn't mind seeing snaps if it came down to it. Sherrick McManus is another guy as well that could, Tracy Porter, could see some meaningful snaps during the season depending on health.
Oh yeah, health is a big one for Tracy Porter. I mean, it seems like ever since he made that interception on Peyton Manning in the Super Bowl, it seems like he just can't stay healthy. But yeah, Terrence Mitchell is another guy that I wouldn't mind seeing him get any meaningful snaps. But I mean, you still got of course Kyle Fuller, Tim Jennings, Alan Ball. Hopefully he steps up. But yeah, I could see Terrence Mitchell seeing some snaps throughout the regular season. I mean, last year due to injuries, Al Lewis-Jean's seen some meaningful snaps, so who knows, anything can happen. And lastly, Aaron, we got JT who asks, do you see Jared Allen as a starter at outside linebacker, or do they go with more 3-4 ready linebacker and Sam Acho?
Well, that's a great question. I'm trying to figure that out myself. Right now, like I said, he looked pretty good in coverage. I mean, he really is not much of a pass rusher anymore. That's just the reality of it. This will definitely be his last year with the Bears. So I temper my expectations when it comes to that. Sam Acho's looked great. I mean, there's really no way around that. In practice, he's looked great. But it seems like the coaching staff is more comfortable with giving a guy like Jared Allen, the veteran, the snaps, even though he's not familiar with the position. Now, realistically, what I think is going to happen is I think you're going to see a pretty good rotation of those top four guys, Houston included. I mean, they got four starting caliber guys there. Obviously, McPhee's going to take the majority of the snaps on one side. Jared Allen's going to see some time. Sam Acho's going to see some time, especially against the run. And, of course, I think Lamarr Houston is going to have a good year. You're talking about, two of those – well, actually, I take that back. Three of those four guys are getting paid, big money. So it's good to see that it's not really a determining factor, at least at this point. But I think we're going to see a steady rotation throughout the season. If Sam Acho keeps playing the way he is, it's going to be really hard to keep him off the field. But, they're going to be running a lot of 3-4 looks. They're going to be running a lot of 4-3 looks. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of these guys to get on the field, including a guy like Will Sutton down on the defensive line. So, just look for different bodies, because there's going to be a lot of people getting playing time, especially until they get the scheme figured out.
Absolutely. And here's my final question for you, Aaron. Do you see any surprise cuts? I mean, is there anybody that can be released that may surprise some people?
There's definitely a few on the table right now. I think one of the big ones, one of the more obvious ones, is Willie Young. I know he started taking snaps with the second team, but I mean, when I was there watching him, talking to people, I mean, he's just not healthy. And you can definitely tell that the confidence factor is there for him. That's the big thing with him. I mean, he's a very confident individual. He had 10 sacks last year, so he had good production. But realistically, he's on the bubble right now, and he's one of the ones that kind of was questionable with the change anyway, and he hasn't seen any meaningful time. I don't know if he's going to play on Saturday. I would kind of doubt it, but we'll have to see what happens. So I think he's one. I definitely think Kadeem Carey's another one, fourth-round pick from last year. If you're comfortable with a guy like Carey, then you don't go off and draft Langford. That's kind of the way I look at it. He's fallen back to fourth on the depth chart. I think he really helped himself this last week. Snorris Perry may have had more yards, have that big run, but Carey was impressive. His biggest thing is, can he contribute on special teams, and how is he as a pass blocker? I mean, can he be a guy that you can trust on second, third down passing situations, or what's his role going to be? Because when you start looking, Jacquizz Rodgers is going to get his fair share of snaps, and obviously Jeremy Langford's going to see some as well. So, I mean, you're really looking at a guy that's going to contribute mainly on special teams unless you see injuries. And, when you look at a guy like Hammer, you look at a guy like Snorris Perry, you got to ask yourself, who has more special teams value? And right now I think that's still Perry. A lot can happen. Injuries can happen. So those would be probably my two surprise cuts. I don't really, there's not many more that I see. I released an article a few weeks ago kind of detailing people who could go. Bostic was also on that list, but it seems like he is healthier than he was before. So I think he'll stick around probably as a reserve. But those are definitely two names to watch out for.
All right, Willie Young and Kadeem Carey, two guys that are on the bubble, on the edge, and could possibly be on their way out of Chicago. Aaron, like I said, that's all I have for you, man. I appreciate your time. Great work, as always. Great insight. Thank you very much. Before I let you go, can you tell us where we can check your workout at?
Yeah, you can go on to BearReport.com, or you can also follow me on Twitter at Aaron Leming. That's 1M, NFL. And I post a lot all the time, as you well know. So I'll also post links to my work. Just posted something not too long ago detailing just how big the Kevin White loss is, or lack thereof. So yeah, that's my main place is where I post everything. So if you guys feel free to follow me there, or check out BearReport.com. Jeremy Stoltz is also a great writer as well.
Absolutely. At Aaron Leming NFL, BearReport.com, and then of course Jeremy at BearReport. Aaron, like I said, man, I appreciate your time, and keep up the great work.
Thank you very much, man. Hope to talk to you again soon.